Chapter 1. The cinders clung to her skin like a second punishment. Leora scrubbed at the hearth until her knuckles bled, her breath clouding faintly in the cold draft that wormed its way through the cracks of the stone walls. It was nearly dawn, but she had not slept. She never slept much anymore. Not when her stepsisters shrieked late into the night about gowns and jewels, about which of them would capture the attention of the Alpha King at the choosing ball. The ball, the single word had become a curse in this house. Ugly thing, Seraphine had hissed at her just hours ago, her voice honeyed with malice as she stepped over Leora's crouched form. You'd frighten even the lowliest Omega if you dared show your face. Imagine thinking the king would look at you. The memory burned hotter than the embers under her raw hands. They always called her ugly. Too thin, too pale, eyes too strange, hair too wild. They never said it outright to their mother, of course. Lady Vera preferred the illusion that her household was harmonious, but she never stopped them either. Why would she? Leora was not her blood. The fire hissed, snapping at the damp wood, and she startled, nearly dropping the poker. A choosing ball. For centuries it had been tradition. Every Alpha King, upon taking the throne, would choose his mate from among the most powerful families in the kingdom. Bloodlines mattered, beauty mattered, but most of all, strength mattered. For the king's queen was not a mere ornament. She was the Luna, the heart of the pack, the balance to his brutal rule. And this year, King Kaelen was choosing. Leora had never seen him, only heard whispers carried like smoke through the villages. That he was ruthless, that he had eyes like a storm, that he had risen to power not through inheritance, but through conquest, defeating every rival alpha until none dared challenge him. A warrior crowned in blood. And he was searching for a queen. "Don't dawdle," came another sharp voice, shattering her thoughts. Leora, the younger stepsister, leaned against the kitchen doorway, already wrapped in a dressing gown of pale silk, hair in perfect spirals that gleamed gold in the weak light. "The seamstress arrives at sunrise, and Mother says you're to clean the floors before then. Unless, of course, you'd like me to tell her you've been lazing by the fire." Leora bit down on the words that rose to her lips. Silence was safer. Leora smirked at her lack of response and swept out, the hem of her robe whispering across the stone floor. For a moment, the only sound was the crackle of the fire and the distant toll of the village bell, announcing the coming dawn. Leora sat back on her heels, her muscles aching, her throat raw with unshed words. She stared into the flames until her vision blurred, wondering, just for a heartbeat, what it might be like to live differently. To walk into the grand hall tomorrow not in rags but in silk. To be seen, not as an unwanted shadow but as something more. Her laugh was bitter, hollow. That life was not hers. It belonged to Seraphine, to Leora, to every pampered daughter with a family name worth whispering. Still, deep in her chest, where even their cruelty could not reach, something pulsed, a stubborn ember that refused to die. And perhaps that ember was what made her glance up when the wind outside shifted, what made her senses prickle as though the night itself was watching her. The choosing ball was still days away, yet already the world was stirring. The kitchen grew colder as the fire burned low. Dawn was a slow bleed of gray light through the warped shutters, outlining the cracks in the stone walls. Leora rose stiffly, her hands sore from scrubbing, and poured the dirty water into the trough outside. The wind bit at her skin, tugging loose strands of her dark hair into her face. Beyond the courtyard, she could just make out the road stretching toward the capital. Already wagons were creaking past, carrying merchants, seamstresses, and jewelers, all summoned for the great event. The choosing ball had not yet begun, but the kingdom was already alive with it. She lingered a moment too long. "Leora!" Lady Vera's voice cracked across the courtyard like a whip. Leora turned, clutching the bucket. Her stepmother stood framed in the doorway, her beauty sharp as a blade even in her mourning robe. Her golden hair was plaited into a crown, her lips painted despite the early hour. "What are you doing out here like a stray dog?" "The seamstress is waiting, and the floor hasn't been touched." Vera's gaze flicked over her as one might a stain. "Useless girl, move." Leora lowered her eyes and obeyed, slipping back into the house. She moved quickly through the hall, her bare feet silent on the cold stone. The seamstress was indeed waiting, a frail bent-backed woman with a measuring cord around her neck and bolts of fabric in muted silvers and blues stacked in her arms. She bowed deeply as Seraphine swept into the room, her steps deliberate, her head held like a queen already crowned. Seraphine's beauty was the kind that stole breath, flaxen hair, flawless skin, lips curved in a cruel smile. Her sister Liora trailed behind, slightly less striking but no less vain, her green eyes glinting with mischief as she caught sight of Leora. "Oh, how dreadful," Liora said sweetly. "The ashes on your face, sister, they almost make her look like she's wearing paint, don't you think?" Seraphine laughed lightly, a cruel, practiced trill. No paint could fix that face. Leora swallowed the sting of their words, focusing instead on helping the seamstress with her fabrics. The older woman gave her a fleeting glance, kind perhaps, but quickly buried under fear. No one in this house dared challenge Lady Vera's daughters. As the sisters twirled and demanded fabrics be held up to their figures, Leora knelt to gather the discarded scraps, soft silks, shimmering satins, things she had never touched before except in secret, when no one watched. Her fingers lingered on a scrap of midnight blue velvet, smooth as water beneath her fingertips. It was foolish, but for an instant, she imagined it draped across her shoulders. Alira's sharp laugh snapped her back. "Look at her, fondling rags like she thinks she'll ever wear them." Seraphine sneered. "Don't waste that scrap. Mother, do make her put it down before she dirties it further." Lady Vera, who had been sipping spiced wine by the window, did not even glance up. "Throw it in the fire if it pleases you. She has no need of such things." Leora dropped the velvet as though burned. The seamstress worked quickly, scribbling notes, measuring the sisters' waists and busts, all while murmuring praise for their figures. Leora's presence shrank further until she was little more than a shadow. Yet as she bent to sweep the discarded threads from the floor, her ears pricked. "And the king?" Seraphine was asking, her tone calculatedly casual. "Is it true what they say, that he slew the Silver Fang Alpha with his bare hands?" The seamstress's eyes darted to Lady Vera, uncertain if she should speak, but Vera merely waved a hand. "They say many things," the woman said softly, "but it is true he is unmatched in strength, a wolf like none before him." Seraphine's lips curved. "Then it will take someone of equal beauty to match him, someone worthy of standing at his side." Liora giggled. "Which means you, of course." The seamstress did not answer. Her gaze flicked once toward Leora, then back down. Leora froze. It was quick, that glance, so quick she might have imagined it, but in it she felt the weight of something unspoken, as though the woman knew, or guessed. Heat rose in her chest, sharp and unsettling. She pushed it down, returning to her work, sweeping the floors until her knees ached. The day bled on, a blur of chores and cruelty. By evening, the manor hummed with preparations, cooks bustling in the kitchens, servants polishing silver, the sisters squealing over gowns and jewels. The choosing ball was only 3 days away, and that night, as Leora returned to the ashes of the hearth, her body aching, she found herself staring once more into the flames. The wind howled outside, and again she felt it, the sensation of being watched. A prickle at the nape of her neck, a pull in her chest as though something beyond those stone walls was calling her name. She closed her eyes, pressing a soot-streaked hand over her heart. Unseen, unheard, a single ember flared brighter within her. The world was shifting, and whether she wished it or not, she would not remain hidden much longer. Chapter 2. The throne room of Blackthorn Keep smelled of steel and smoke. Torches guttered in their sconces, casting restless shadows against the vaulted stone ceiling. The great banners of the conquered hung heavy from the beams, red for the blood fangs, silver for the silver fangs, green for the hollow claws, all torn from their fallen strongholds, stitched with Kalen's sigil, a black wolf crowned in flames. He had earned them all in battle. Kalin sat upon the throne of obsidian, its carved edges biting into his palms where they rested on the armrests. The hall before him stretched long and empty, its silence broken only by the soft pad of a wolf pacing at his feet. The beast was massive, fur the color of smoke, eyes glinting the same storm gray as his master's, Vanar, his shadow, his brother in blood though not in kin. Kalen's gaze swept the room, though he saw little. His thoughts were far from this hall. The choosing ball. He despised the pomp of it, the jewels, the silks, the simpering daughters of noble lines who painted their lips red and their throats sweeter still, all hoping to be chosen as Luna. They looked at him as though he were prey instead of predator. They had no understanding of what it meant to stand at his side, what it cost to be bound to a throne carved by blood. And yet, tradition demanded it. His advisors, his generals, even the council of elders pressed the matter. The king must have his queen, they said. The pack must have its Luna, not for romance, not for softness, but because strength must be balanced and power shared. The Alpha King's bond with his mate was said to be sacred, blessed by the moon goddess herself. Without it, no reign could endure. Kalin had no illusions about blessings. He had clawed his way to power with tooth and steel, not divine favor. But still, he could not deny the truth. The kingdom teetered. Rivals whispered in shadows. Old enemies circled like vultures. Without a Luna, his rule would always be questioned. Vanar rumbled low in his throat, breaking Kalen's thoughts. The wolf lifted his head toward the door. A heartbeat later, it opened, and Captain Dareth strode in, his black armor gleaming with fresh polish. He bowed low, fist over heart. "My king, the first of the noble houses arrive even now. Their daughters will be prepared for the ball." Kalen's jaw tightened, like lambs dressed for slaughter. Dareth hesitated, wisely choosing silence. "Tell me," Kalin said after a moment, his voice rough as gravel. "What do you see when you look at them, these daughters?" The captain blinked. "I see women eager to be queen, my lord, some with ambition in their eyes, some with fear." Kalin leaned back, his gaze narrowing. "And do you think any would bleed for this throne? Do you think any understand what it is to be mated to a wolf who has slain kings?" Dareth swallowed. "Perhaps not, my lord, but the goddess chooses through you. The bond will speak, the bond. Always the bond." Kalen's hands flexed against the throne. He remembered faintly his mother's voice telling him of it when he was a boy. "When you meet her, you will know," she had whispered. "Your wolf will know. Your heart will know. It cannot be forced nor denied." He had believed once, before blood, before war. Now he wondered if such things were myths meant to soothe children. Yet still, in the dark hours before dawn, when sleep eluded him, he sometimes felt it, that hollow ache in his chest, that restless pull toward something unseen. As though the world itself waited, holding its breath. Vanar's growl deepened. The wolf's hackles rose, though no threat presented itself. Kalin reached down, pressing his palm to the beast's head. "You feel it too," he murmured. The wolf's gray eyes gleamed in answer. Dareth shifted uneasily. "Shall I dismiss the arrivals, my king? Delay the ball until—" "No." Kalen's voice cracked like a whip. He rose from the throne in one fluid motion, towering over his captain. The air seemed to darken with his presence, his power coiling like a storm about to break. "The ball will proceed. Let the houses bring their daughters. Let them line up in their silks and jewels. I will see them all." He strode forward, boots striking the stone, each step echoing. Vanar padded beside him, silent as a shadow. "And if the bond is real," Kalin said, his voice low, dangerous, "then the goddess will not hide her from me." The great doors of the throne room boomed shut behind him, sealing the promise into stone. Unseen by king or captain, high above in the rafters, a draft stirred. The flame of a torch bent suddenly sideways, as though drawn by some far-off wind. Something was moving in the kingdom, something neither throne nor hearth could deny. Chapter 3. The manor did not sleep. By the time the sun rose on the second day before the choosing ball, the household thrummed with a feverish energy. Servants darted through the halls with trays of perfumes, bolts of cloth, polished jewels, while the air rang with the shrieks of Seraphine and Leora demanding one more adjustment, one more braid, one more lace tied tighter. Leora moved among them like a ghost. She carried water, scrubbed floors, polished silver, and endured the constant sting of her sisters' voices. Her body was weary, but her mind would not rest. The seamstress's fleeting glance from the day before haunted her. That tiny flicker of something, recognition, pity, warning, had burrowed into her like a thorn, She could not dislodge it, and worse still, she could not shake the strange sensation that had been growing since that night by the fire. That crawling awareness, as though the very air had eyes, as though the world itself pressed closer, waiting. Clumsy thing! A sharp sting lanced across her knuckles as Leora smacked her hand away from a tray of combs. Leora bit back a cry. "Do you want to ruin my hair with your filthy fingers?" Leora snapped, her green eyes flashing. She sat before a gilded mirror in the solar, her golden curls tumbling over her shoulders as a servant carefully wove strands into an elaborate crown braid. "Your lucky mother even lets you breathe the same air as us while we prepare. I'd have locked you in the cellar if it were up to me." Seraphine lounged nearby on a chaise, idly examining her nails. A cellar would be too generous. The stables would suit her better. Her gaze lifted, cold and precise. No one wants a face like that haunting the halls. Leora lowered her eyes, focusing on gathering the spilled combs before her. Her cheeks burned, but her voice remained silent. Words only fueled their cruelty, but inside a storm churned. Ugly, useless. Ash girl. The words lashed at her again and again, and yet, beneath them, something fought back. A stubborn ember of defiance that refused to die. They could strip her of dignity, of comfort, of family, but they had never truly broken her, and they hated her for it. By evening, the manor glowed with candlelight. Lady Vera hosted a gathering of lesser nobles who had arrived early for the ball. The great hall rang with music and laughter, the air thick with the scent of roasted meats and spiced wine. Leora was not allowed at the feast, of course. She remained in the kitchens, carrying platters and scrubbing pots long after her arms ached. But when the laughter grew too loud, when the heat of the hearth pressed too close, she slipped outside into the cold night. The sky was a scatter of stars, the moon a silver sickle hanging above the dark trees. Leora drew her shawl tight around her shoulders and walked to the edge of the courtyard, where the forest pressed close. Silence, sweet and clean. Her breath fogged the air. She tipped her head back, staring at the moon, and for the first time in days, let her mind drift. What would it be like to be chosen? She laughed bitterly at herself. Foolish thought. She had no gown, no jewels, no family name worth speaking. Even if she somehow walked into that grand hall, the noble daughters would tear her to shreds with their painted smiles. And yet, deep inside, her heart whispered, what if? She closed her eyes, and for a moment she could almost feel it, a pull, low and insistent, like a thread stretching out from her chest into the darkness. As though somewhere beyond the forest, beyond the stars, someone tugged gently at her soul. The sensation startled her. She pressed her hand against her sternum, her skin prickling. The ember inside her flared hotter, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat, and then, a rustle. Her eyes snapped open. From the tree line, shadows shifted. A pair of glowing eyes blinked back at her. Not golden, like a common wolf, but pale and storm gray. Her breath caught. The beast was massive, its form barely contained by the shadows, fur the color of smoke. It stood utterly still, watching her. Leora froze, every instinct screaming at her to run, but her legs would not obey. Her pulse thundered, and yet she felt no fear. Instead, an odd calm settled over her, as though she had known those eyes all her life. The wolf tilted its head, studying her, and then, as silently as it had appeared, it turned and slipped back into the forest, vanishing like mist. Leora's knees gave way. She sank onto the cold stone, clutching her shawl tight, her chest heaving. Had she imagined it? Was exhaustion twisting her senses? No. The pull in her chest still thrummed, stronger now, as though a door had cracked open inside her. She pressed trembling fingers to her lips. Something had changed, and whatever it was, it would not let her remain in the shadows much longer. Chapter 4. The moon was sharp above Blackthorn Keep, a pale blade cleaving the night. Kalin stood at the highest balcony of the fortress, cloak drawn against the cold. The wind bit at his scarred cheek, carrying with it the scents of the surrounding forests, pine, ash, damp earth, and something else. Something elusive. Vaynar prowled restlessly at his side, the wolf's storm-gray eyes flashing in the torchlight. His hackles were raised, not from danger but from hunger, the kind that was not of the flesh. Kaelen knew the feeling. For nights now, the restlessness had plagued him. His body craved battle, yet no foe remained who dared challenge him. His mind demanded order, yet the keep was too quiet, the halls too neat. He had won too much, too quickly, and now the silence of victory pressed on him like a cage. And beneath it all, that hollow ache. He gripped the stone railing until his knuckles whitened. The bond. The cursed whispers of the elders, the honeyed promises of the goddess, that one day he would find her, the one who balanced him, the one whose heart beat with his. He had dismissed it as fable, yet his wolf stirred, pacing, growling, every night as though hunting something unseen. Vaynor stopped abruptly, nose lifted. His body went taut, ears pricking toward the distant horizon. Kalin felt it too, a tug, low and insistent, threading through his chest. His pulse quickened, though he could not name why. "What is it?" he murmured. The wolf's growl rumbled deep, but not in warning, in yearning. And then Kalen's vision flickered. Just for a breath, the night wavered. He saw trees, a courtyard of pale stone, and a girl cloaked in shadow. Her hair fell wild around her face, her shawl clutched close, her eyes wide as she stared back at him. The image vanished. Kalin staggered, gripping the railing. His wolf snarled, lunging forward in a blur of fur and muscle. Bones cracked, sinews shifted, and in a heartbeat, Kalin was no longer a man. His massive wolf form landed on the cold stone, claws scraping sparks as he leapt from the balcony into the night. He ran, through the forest, over the frozen earth, faster and faster. The wind whipped past his ears, his heart thundered in his chest. He followed that pull, that thread tugging him ever onward, until the trees parted to reveal a manor on the edge of the woods. A pale light glowed from its windows, laughter spilled faintly into the night. Kalin slowed, muscles coiled. His wolf's instincts screamed to approach, but his mind warred against them. What was he doing here? This was no battlefield, no enemy keep. It was a noble's estate, wealthy enough to flaunt candles and song in the dead of night. And yet, his paws carried him closer. The courtyard lay quiet, moonlight pooling over the stones. And there, at the edge, near the shadows of the forest, she stood, the girl from his vision. Her shawl fluttered around her thin frame, her eyes fixed on him, wide but not afraid. The scent of ash clung to her, yet beneath it was something purer, sharper, like silver in moonlight. Kalin froze, every muscle rigid. The wolf inside him went silent. In all his battles, in all his years of blood and conquest, he had never felt this. The bond struck like a blade to the heart, hot and undeniable. His soul roared in recognition. Mate. The word thundered through him, primal and absolute. The girl gasped softly, clutching her chest as though she too felt it. Her lips parted, her gaze locked with his. For one breath the world stilled. Kalin took a step forward, and stopped. He could not. Not yet. The girl was no noble, no daughter presented by council decree. She was dressed in rags, her hands raw, her shoulders stooped with toil. No family name shone around her like a crown. To claim her now, without proof, without certainty, would ignite war among the packs. And yet leaving her felt like tearing flesh from bone. The wolf snarled, but Kalin forced him back, muscle by muscle, until the beast retreated into his skin, and he stood once more as a man, breath steaming in the cold air. From the shadows, unseen by her, he whispered to the night, "You are mine." And then he vanished into the trees, leaving only the echo of his vow behind. The forest swallowed him, but the bond remained. It thrummed through his veins, hotter than battle, sharper than any blade. For the first time in years, Kalen's heart pounded not with fury but with anticipation. The choosing ball could not come soon enough. Chapter 5. The dawn after the wolf's appearance came gray and heavy, as though the sky itself carried secrets it refused to spill. Leora did not sleep. She lay on her straw pallet in the tiny attic room, staring at the cracked beams above her head while her mind replayed the night again and again. Those eyes, that size. No ordinary wolf could be so vast, so silent, so human in its gaze. And the way her chest had burned when she met its eyes, as though her heart was no longer entirely hers. She pressed a hand against her sternum. The ember still pulsed there, faint but steady, like the beat of a second heart. A dream, she told herself, a trick of moonlight and exhaustion. Yet even as she whispered the lie, her body knew better. Something had happened. Something had changed. The household, of course, cared nothing for her disquiet. By mid-morning, Lady Vera's voice rang sharp through the halls, commanding servants to prepare trunks of silks, jewels, perfumes, shoes polished until they gleamed like glass. The choosing ball was tomorrow. Tomorrow. The word rolled through Leora like thunder. She swept the floors of the solar while her stepsisters preened in the mirror. Seraphine tried on gown after gown, each one a cascade of silk and pearls, until she declared herself radiant enough to blind the king. Leora twirled in pale pink chiffon, shrieking with laughter as she demanded the servants lace her tighter, tighter, until her waist was barely a breath wide. "Imagine his face," Seraphine said, her smile sharp as glass, "when he sees us enter the hall. He'll forget every other girl exists." "And what of her?" Illyra's green eyes darted to Leora, who knelt at their feet, gathering fallen pins. Seraphine's laugh rang clear. "Her? Please!" "They'll never let something like her inside. If she so much as brushed past the threshold, the king's guards would drag her out for fear she'd curse the hall with her ugliness." The pins bit into Leora's palms. She kept her gaze on the floor, but her jaw ached from holding back the words that burned in her throat. Ugly, ash girl, worthless. They thought the words would chain her. But chains could break, and for the first time in years she wondered if perhaps hers already had. That evening, when the household finally quieted, Leora crept to the kitchens. The fire burned low, shadows dancing along the soot-streaked walls. She should have been scrubbing, polishing, preparing for yet another list of chores. But instead, she reached for the hearth poker and drew it slowly through the flames. The metal glowed red. Sparks leapt and died. She stared at the fire, willing it to speak, to reveal something. Her heart thudded harder, the ember within pulsing in time with the crackle of the flames. The air thickened, warm against her skin. For a heartbeat, she swore the fire leaned toward her, responding to her breath, her pulse. Her fingers trembled. She pulled back quickly, heart racing. No, impossible. And yet, the heat lingered, not on the poker, but in her veins. The next morning, the manor erupted in chaos. The family's carriage was polished until it gleamed, its black lacquer catching the sunlight like obsidian. The sisters shrieked and flung gowns across the rooms, demanding jewels, perfumes, combs. Lady Vera ordered servants to scrub every last speck of dust from the carriage wheels, and "Leora, stay here," Vera said curtly when she found her in the kitchens with a basket of bread. "You'll only shame us if you're seen near the capital. Tend the house while we're gone." Leora's heart sank. She had known this was coming, yet the sting was sharp. To be left behind while the entire kingdom gathered for the choosing. It was cruel, but not unexpected. Seraphine leaned from the stairwell, resplendent in emerald silk that clung to her like ivy. "Don't worry, Ash girl," she purred. "When I return as the king's queen, perhaps I'll let you serve as my scullery maid in the palace. It would be a step up for you." Illyra's laugh followed like a slap. The household thundered with departure. Trunks loaded, gowns packed, jewels hidden in velvet pouches. The carriage rumbled to life, wheels crunching on gravel as the sisters climbed in, their perfume lingering like poison in the air. And then, silence. The manor stood empty. For the first time in years, Leora was truly alone. She sank onto the cold stone steps, the weight of the day pressing heavy. The world beyond the forest stirred, alive with celebration, yet she was caged here, shackled by cruelty and circumstance. Her gaze drifted to the distant road, winding toward the capital. The ball. Something in her chest burned hotter, sharper. The ember refused to stay quiet. Her fingers curled into fists. No matter what Vera commanded, no matter what her sisters sneered, something inside her whispered that she was meant to go. And for the first time in her life, Leora dared to think, what if I did? The wind rose, scattering ashes from the hearth across the empty hall. They swirled around her like sparks, like whispers, and the ember in her chest flared, blazing brighter than ever before. Tomorrow the world would change. Chapter 6. The manor was too quiet without them. For hours after the carriage departed, Leora wandered the empty halls, her bare feet silent against the stone. Every corner carried echoes of her stepsister's laughter, her stepmother's scolding, the endless clatter of servants rushing at their command. Now there was only the creak of beams and the occasional sigh of wind through the shutters. She should have felt relief, freedom. Instead, unease pressed against her ribs. The choosing ball was tonight. Even now, the nobles' carriages would be pouring into the capital, wheels rattling over cobblestones, lanterns glowing as brightly as the moon. Great halls would be filled with music and candlelight, silks rustling as daughters of every highborn family displayed themselves before the king. And she was here, dressed in rags, soot streaking her arms, a prisoner of a house that never wanted her. The thought dug into her bones like ice. She tried to distract herself with chores, though no one remained to demand them. She scrubbed the kitchen floor until her hands were raw, polished silver that would not be used, dusted shelves already bare. But no matter how she tried to bury herself in labor, her thoughts clawed free. That wolf, those storm-gray eyes, the way her chest had burned when it looked at her, as though something deep inside had been recognized. It hadn't been imagination. She knew it with a certainty that made her tremble, and that ember inside her, once a quiet spark, now pulsed hot and steady. It whispered to her, "Go." By dusk, the manor grew darker, the shutters rattling as the wind picked up outside. Leora sat before the hearth, staring at the flames, her arms wrapped tight around her knees. The fire bent strangely tonight, its sparks leaping higher than usual, almost as if reaching toward her. Her pulse quickened, she stretched out her hand, hesitant, trembling. And as her fingers brushed the warmth, the flames curved toward her, bending with her breath. Her hand flew back, her heart hammered. Magic. The word formed in her mind, though she dared not speak it aloud. Magic was whispered of in the kingdom, but only in fearful tones. The moon-blessed bloodlines, those said to carry the goddess's power, were all but extinct, purged, hunted, erased by those who feared their strength. If this ember inside her was truly power, then she was more cursed than she'd ever imagined. And yet, when she closed her eyes, she could still feel it, a thread pulling her toward the capital, toward the choosing. The night fell heavy. From the highest window of the attic, Leora could just see the faint glow on the horizon, the capital alight with hundreds of torches, bonfires, and lanterns. Even miles away, the celebration bled into the sky. She pressed her forehead to the glass, her breath fogging the pain. It should have been impossible. She had no gown, no carriage, no invitation. The guards would laugh her away if she even approached the palace gates, and yet the ember burned. She could not stay. Her hands clenched against the windowsill. She thought of Seraphine's cruel smile, Elira's laughter, Vera's disdain. She thought of the wolf's eyes in the dark. She thought of the way her heart had nearly torn itself from her chest when she met its gaze. And she rose. The manor's servants' quarters held little of worth, but desperation gave her courage. She searched the trunks left behind, ignored and forgotten. In one, under a pile of moth-eaten blankets, she found it, an old gown, faded and patched, once belonging to a maid long gone. It was no silk, no satin. Its hem was frayed, its color dull, but it was whole. She slipped it over her head. The fabric hung loose around her thin frame, the sleeves too long, the waist too wide. Yet when she looked in the cracked mirror, something in her reflection made her pause. For the first time, she did not see only ashes. Her dark hair tumbled wild over her shoulders. Her eyes, too strange, too bright, glowed like polished amber in the candlelight. The gown, plain as it was, could not dim the spark that pulsed beneath her skin. She lifted her chin. The ember flared. Outside, the night wind tore across the fields. Leora drew her shawl tight around her shoulders, her bare feet cold against the stones as she stepped out into the dark. The road stretched before her, a ribbon of shadow leading toward the glow of the capital. Every step felt heavier than the last, yet lighter too, like chains breaking one by one. Behind her, the manor loomed silent, its windows dark. Ahead, the world waited, and as the wind rushed around her, scattering ashes into the night, she swore she heard a whisper, not of cruelty, not of mockery, but of promise. Go, find him. The choosing ball awaited, and whether fate or folly, she would not be left behind. Chapter 7. The road stretched black and endless before her. Leora walked with the shawl pulled tight around her shoulders, the coarse gown tugging at her ankles with every gust of wind. The night was cold, colder than she expected. The earth was damp with frost, and each step sent needles of chill through her bare feet. Still, she pressed on, The glow on the horizon grew brighter with each mile, a golden halo against the night sky, the capital, the choosing ball. She told herself it was madness. She had no right to go, no hope of even reaching the palace gates. And yet with every step, the ember inside her burned hotter, urging her forward. It was no longer a whisper. It was a call. Hours passed. The forest loomed on either side of the road, branches skeletal in the moonlight. Owls hooted in the distance, and once, far off, she thought she heard the howl of a wolf. Her heart lurched, the memory of storm-gray eyes flashed before her. Her steps faltered. She turned, scanning the shadows. Nothing moved. Yet the hairs on her arms prickled, her instincts certain she was not alone. She hurried onward, quickening her pace, her breath fogging in the cold air. The road dipped, and suddenly the silence broke. Voices. Leora pressed herself into the trees as the rumble of wheels approached. Around the bend came a grand carriage, its lacquered sides glinting in torchlight. 2 sleek black horses drew it, their hooves striking sparks against the stone. Guards rode alongside, armored and grim, spears glinting. Inside, she glimpsed a young woman through the curtained window, her hair piled high, jewels glittering at her throat. She laughed, the sound muffled but sweet, as if she had never known hunger or cruelty. The choosing ball. Leora's throat tightened. The carriages would be arriving all night, bearing noble daughters wrapped in silks and diamonds, each more radiant than the last. And here she was, in a ragged gown, ash clinging to her hair, barefoot on the frozen road. For the first time, doubt stabbed her resolve. What was she doing? How could she possibly walk into that palace? But as the carriage passed and the torches dwindled, the ember inside her surged again, hot and relentless. Her chest ached with it, as if her very soul demanded she continue. And so she did. By dawn, the road grew crowded. Merchants with wagons of fruit and silks, traveling musicians, families hoping to catch even a glimpse of the spectacle, all flocked toward the capital. Leora kept her head down, walking among them, unnoticed. To the world, she was only another servant girl, another shadow. That suited her fine. But when the walls of the capital rose before her, her breath caught. The city was vast, its gates flanked by towering statues of wolves carved from white stone. Banners hung crimson and black, the king's sigil bold against the morning sky. Trumpets blared from within, announcing the day of the choosing. Crowds thronged at the gates, pushing and jostling. Guards in dark armor held the line. Spears crossed to keep order. Carriages rolled through, their noble passengers stepping out to be greeted with fanfare. Leora lingered at the edge, her heart pounding. This was it. One step forward, and she would be inside the capital. Inside the current of fate pulling her toward something she could not yet name. One step back, and she could vanish into the woods, return to the ashes, and let the ember burn itself to nothing. Her throat tightened. She thought of her stepmother's cold eyes, her stepsister's laughter. She thought of the years she had spent on her knees, scrubbing floors until her skin split. She thought of the wolf in the night, storm-gray eyes locking with hers, and the fire in her chest answering. Her feet moved. She stepped forward. The crush of the crowd swallowed her, carrying her through the gates. The capital was alive with color and sound. Streets strung with lanterns, stalls overflowing with food and trinkets, musicians playing pipes and drums. Children darted between nobles and beggars alike, laughter echoing. And above it all, rising at the city's heart like a black mountain, stood the palace. Its towers knifed the sky, banners streaming from every spire. The walls were carved with wolves in eternal motion, their eyes gleaming gold in the sunlight. Music drifted from within, a symphony that made the very stones tremble. Leora's breath caught. The ball. Somehow she was here. Yet her awe quickly soured. At the palace gates, nobles stepped from their carriages to be announced by heralds, their names shouted across the marble steps. Daughters in gowns of silver, sapphire, and crimson curtsied, their jewels dazzling as they swept inside. Leora shrank back. She had no name worth speaking, no gown worth showing, no jewels to dazzle. The ember burned hotter, defiant. She clenched her fists. She would find a way. She had come this far, and she would not let the gates close against her. Her gaze swept the crowd, desperate, searching. And then she saw her. An old woman stood near the shadow of the wall, cloaked in gray, her face lined and weathered. Her eyes, bright and sharp despite her years, rested on Leora, as though she had been waiting for her. The woman's lips curved faintly, and she beckoned. Leora's heart lurched. She stepped toward her. Chapter 8. The crowd surged around her in waves, pressing closer to the marble steps of the palace. Nobles in embroidered silks glided past, perfumed and painted, their names shouted proudly by the heralds at the gates. Each girl sparkled brighter than the last, each one raised chin high with the certainty that she was destined for the king's gaze. Leora stood at the edge, half hidden in the shadow of the gate's great arch, her shawl pulled tight, her heart a frantic drumbeat. She did not belong. She could feel the truth of it with every glance cast her way. Servants wrinkled their noses. Guards ignored her as though she were invisible. Nobles looked past her entirely. And yet, the old woman's eyes did not look past her. They saw her. Leora froze under that piercing gaze. The woman's cloak was plain gray, its hood shadowing most of her face, but her eyes glinted like moonlight on water, sharp, knowing, ancient. When the woman crooked a finger, beckoning, Leora hesitated only a heartbeat before pushing through the throng. Each step felt heavier, as though the air thickened between them. When she reached her, the woman leaned close, her voice a rasp that carried strange weight. "You burn too brightly to stand among shadows, child." Leora's breath caught. "What?" The woman's thin smile deepened. "I felt your fire the moment you stepped into the city. Did you think you could walk into the capital unseen, with the goddess's spark blazing inside you?" The ember in Leora's chest flared so hot it stole her breath. I don't understand," she whispered. The woman's hand, withered but steady, closed around hers. Her skin was cool as stone. "You will. But first, you must enter the palace, not as you are." Her gaze flicked over Leora's patched gown, the soot still smudged on her arms, the fraying shawl. The corners of her mouth turned wry. The wolves would not see past rags, even if fate itself shouted in their ears. "I have nothing else," Leora said bitterly, her throat tight. "I should not even be here. My stepmother forbade me. My sisters—" Her voice cracked, shame and anger warring. The old woman tilted her head. "And yet here you stand." Leora's chest tightened. She had come, despite every chain meant to hold her back. She didn't know why, only that the ember inside her refused to let her stay behind. The woman's eyes softened for the first time. "Good. Courage brought you here. Now courage will take you inside." She released Leora's hand only to draw something from her cloak, a small vial of liquid, faintly luminous, silver as moonlight. "What is it?" Leora whispered. "Not a lie," the woman murmured, "not a trick, a revelation. Drink and what is hidden will be seen. Drink and the palace will open to you." Leora stared at the vial, her pulse hammering. She had heard every tale of poison, curses, bargains gone wrong. To trust a stranger at the palace gates was foolish, mad. And yet, her chest burned hotter than ever, as if the ember recognized the silver glow. Her hands shook as she took the vial. The woman's voice softened, but beneath it thrummed the gravity of prophecy. "The king is waiting. Whether you walk to him or run, the bond will find you. Better to walk clothed in truth than chained in ashes." Leora closed her eyes. Her stepsister's laughter echoed in her mind. Too ugly, too worthless, too lowborn. When she drank, the liquid was cool and sharp, like swallowing starlight. It spread through her veins, igniting every nerve. She gasped, stumbling, clutching her chest as light flared under her skin. Her gown shimmered. The frayed hem mended, the fabric deepening from dull gray to a luminous silver that caught the lamplight like water. The shawl dissolved into a cascade of silk, draping from her shoulders. Her hair tumbled in dark waves, catching sparks of silver as though the stars themselves had fallen into it. She stood trembling, transformed, yet still herself, only unveiled. Her breath caught. The old woman's smile was knowing, satisfied. "There. As the goddess made you, now go." "But wait," Leora stammered. "Who are you?" The woman's eyes gleamed. "Only a hand on the path. You will walk the rest alone." And before Leora could speak again, the press of the crowd surged between them, and the old woman was gone. The heralds at the gate called name after name. Lady Morel of House Vera. Leora's heart stuttered. Her sisters. She craned her neck and saw them step from their carriage, Seraphine gleaming in emerald, Liora in pink silk, both glittering with jewels stolen from her mother's coffers. They preened, laughing, certain the king's gaze would fall on them. Her stomach twisted, fury rising like bile. She would not let them decide her fate tonight. Not anymore. As the heralds prepared to announce the next noble, Leora moved. Her silver gown caught the torchlight, her steps steady as she ascended the marble stairs. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The herald faltered, glancing at her, uncertain. Leora lifted her chin. Her voice rang clear despite her racing heart. "Announce me." The herald blinked. "My lady, your name?" She hesitated. The truth would condemn her, stepdaughter of a minor house, scorned, unwanted. But something deep within whispered, "Do not cower. Speak." Her lips parted. "Leora," she said. No house, no title, only her name. For a breathless moment silence reigned. Then the herald's voice boomed across the marble steps. "Lady Leora." The gates opened, and she stepped inside. Chapter 9. The palace glowed like a jewel against the night. From the throne where he sat, Kalin could see the reflection of 1,000 candles dancing on marble floors polished so smooth they gleamed like ice. Music swelled, violins and flutes threading through the hall as nobles moved in currents of silk and jewels. The choosing ball had begun, and already Kalin was weary of it. He wore the trappings of his station, black and silver lined with wolf's fur, the crown of iron and obsidian heavy upon his brow. But inside, his wolf prowled, restless. It clawed at him, pacing, growling, straining against the cage of duty. "She is near," it snarled. "Why do you waste time with these hollow offerings?" Kalin tightened his grip on the armrest of the throne. He forced himself to sit still as the steward announced yet another name. Another daughter stepping forward with a curtsy rehearsed 100 times. "Lady Liora of House Vera." The girl swept into a bow so deep her jewels nearly spilled onto the marble. Her gown was pink silk, clinging, her smile bright as she dared to lift her gaze to him. His wolf recoiled. Kalin inclined his head just enough to be polite, his face impassive. He had grown used to the masks nobles wore, their daughters trained to flutter lashes and tilt chins, to move like ornaments rather than people. None of them stirred the bond, none of them carried the fire his wolf demanded. And yet, as each girl curtsied and retreated, he could feel the court growing hungrier, waiting. The lords at his side whispered, weighing dowries, alliances, power. His mother, seated just below the throne, watched him keenly, her eyes sharp with expectation. The kingdom needed a queen, but he needed his mate. And the two were not the same. The music swelled again, drowning the hall. "Lady Seraphine of House Vera." This one moved with arrogance rather than grace. Her emerald gown shimmered, her dark hair arranged in elaborate curls that framed her pale face. She curtsied low, her eyes glinting with ambition as they met his. "Choose me," that gaze demanded. "I will give you beauty, power, heirs. I will not be broken." Kalen's wolf growled low. His chest ached, a hollow ache that grew sharper with each passing name. The bond was close, he could feel it, close enough that his blood burned. And yet she was not here. Not yet. How much longer would he be forced to endure this parade of masks? He shifted in his seat, scanning the hall. The nobles laughed and whispered. Servants darted with trays of gold and crystal. Beyond the marble pillars, the great doors remained open, heralds still calling names as carriages spilled their treasures. His wolf stilled. Now, Kalen's pulse quickened. "Lady Leora." The name rang out, clear and simple, without house or title. The hall stilled. Heads turned. A ripple of murmurs spread through the court like wind through grass. And then she entered. Silver. That was Kalen's first thought. Her gown shimmered like moonlight, every step catching the light in shifting waves. Her hair tumbled in dark waves over her shoulders, threaded with silver as though the stars themselves had tangled there. Her face, too striking, too unpolished to fit among the painted nobles, was luminous in its defiance. But it was not her beauty that stole his breath. It was the fire. The bond struck him like lightning, searing through every nerve, every vein. His chest burned, his wolf howled, and for the first time in years, Kaelen could breathe. "Mate." The wolf's roar nearly shattered him. He gripped the throne to keep from rising too fast, but his body was no longer his own. Every muscle strained toward her, every breath pulling her scent across the hall, ash and wildflowers, smoke and rain, something raw and untamed. She faltered only slightly as the nobles whispered, but her chin lifted, her amber eyes fierce despite the weight of the stairs. She walked as though she belonged, though the court clearly believed otherwise. Kalen's heart pounded. At last, at last. His mother leaned close, her voice sharp beneath the music. Who is she? She carries no house name. Kaelen ignored her. His wolf snarled at the intrusion, focused only on the silver-clad figure crossing the marble. Every step she took echoed inside him, binding them tighter. He could feel her fire, her heartbeat, the pulse of the ember in her chest answering the storm inside his. She was his, and he would not let her slip away. The herald's voice faltered, uncertain as she reached the foot of the throne. The hall buzzed with whispers. No house, no lineage, how dare she? Kaelen rose. The crowd fell silent. His wolf prowled just beneath his skin, demanding he claim her here and now. But Kaelen forced himself to move with measured control, every inch the king they feared. He descended the steps slowly, his gaze locked on hers. Her eyes widened as he approached, fire and fear warring within them. But she did not bow her head, did not cower. The bond blazed between them, undeniable. Kaelen stopped before her, close enough to hear her breath, to see the tremor in her hands, and in a voice that carried through the hall low and unyielding, he spoke the only truth that mattered. You are mine. Chapter 10. The world stopped. Leora had thought herself ready for stares, for whispers, for the cruel laughter that had followed her all her life, but she had not been ready for this. The king, tall, terrible, impossibly regal, was no longer sitting distant on his throne of stone and iron. He was before her, close enough that his shadow fell across her, close enough that she could see the hard line of his jaw, the storm gray of his eyes. Eyes she knew. Her chest blazed, the ember inside her flaring so bright it nearly broke her ribs. And then, in a voice that rolled through the vast marble hall and shattered every sneer, every whisper, he said it. You are mine. The words sank into her bones, into her very blood. Her knees nearly buckled. Gasps erupted around them, the court rippling with shock, outrage, disbelief. She heard her sisters' voices sharp above the rest, Seraphine's hiss of fury, Alira's shriek of protest. But they were only distant echoes, because all that mattered was him. And the bond. The fire that had haunted her since the night in the forest surged like a flood now. A tide she could not resist. It poured through her veins, setting every nerve alight, weaving itself into her heartbeat. Her gaze locked with his, and she knew, without reason, without doubt, that he felt it too. Her soul reached for his, and his claimed hers. The distance between them hummed with energy so thick she swore she could touch it. When he lifted a hand, hesitant, though his eyes burned with certainty, her breath caught. Would he really, before all of them? Yes. His fingers brushed her cheek. Heat jolted through her, so fierce and sudden she gasped. The world blurred, her body trembling as though it recognized him more deeply than her mind ever could. His thumb lingered against her skin, reverent, as if she were something fragile and holy. The whispers swelled, scandalized, horrified, but Kaelen did not look away. His storm-gray eyes softened, not with pity, never with pity, but with something far more dangerous, devotion, possession, a kind of awe she had never seen in anyone's eyes when they looked at her. You, he said again, his voice lower now, meant only for her, are mine. Her lips parted, but no sound emerged. Her body burned, her heart raced, but her mind reeled. This was the Alpha King, the man whispered of in fear, in reverence, the most powerful wolf in the kingdom. He could have chosen anyone, any jewel-bedecked daughter of a noble house, and yet he was looking at her, the ash girl in patched gowns, the unwanted shadow, the girl told all her life she was nothing. Tears stung her eyes. You... Her voice cracked, trembling. You don't even know my name. His gaze softened, but his wolf glinted in the depths of it, fierce and unyielding. Then tell me, he said. Tell me, and I will carve it into the bones of this kingdom. Her breath hitched, the fire between them pulsed, urging her to speak, to bridge the last impossible gap. Leora, she whispered. The way he breathed it, low, reverent, as if it were a prayer, nearly undid her. Leora, he repeated, tasting it, claiming. His hand slid to the back of her neck, his touch steady, grounding, as if to anchor her against the storm of whispers and stares. My Leora. The bond flared at his words, a blaze so fierce her vision blurred. Her knees weakened, but he was already pulling her closer, his arms strong around her waist, holding her upright. And for the first time in her life, she felt safe. Truly safe. Around them, chaos erupted. Outrageous, a lord barked. She has no house, no name of standing. She bewitched him, another shouted. Some trick, some sorcery. But their protests were distant, meaningless. Because when Kalin bent his head nearer, his lips brushing the shell of her ear, his voice drowned out all others. Do not fear them, he murmured. They cannot touch you. Not while you are mine. A shiver ran through her. The words were both promise and command, both terrifying and intoxicating. She wanted to protest. She was no queen, no noble, she did not belong here. But the bond burned away her doubts. It whispered truths she had never dared to dream. You are not nothing. You are chosen. You are his. And deep down beneath the years of cruelty and ashes, a part of her wanted to believe it. A part of her already did. Kalin drew back slightly, enough to meet her gaze again. For a heartbeat, the Alpha King, conqueror, ruler, wolf, looked at her not as a sovereign looks upon a subject but as a man looks upon the other half of his soul. His eyes were fierce, yes, but there was gentleness too, an aching tenderness she had never known. And in that moment, with the world watching, with the court seething, with her sisters burning holes into her back with their glares, Kalin did something no one expected. He bowed his head. To her. The king bowed. Leora's breath caught, her heart stuttering. The hall gasped as one, the sound like a wave crashing. Kalen's lips curved faintly, wolfish, unrepentant. Then, in a voice only she could hear, he said, "Dance with me." And when he offered his hand, she placed hers in his without hesitation, because for the first time in her life she did not feel ugly, or worthless, or alone. For the first time, she felt like a queen. Chapter 11. The hall was frozen in silence. Nobles gaped. Servants held their breath. The herald, who only moments before had been announcing names in a practiced monotone, stood pale and rigid, as if struck dumb by what he had just witnessed. The Alpha King had bowed, and now he held out his hand to a girl with no house, no title, no jewels save the fire in her eyes. Leora's heart thundered. Her hand trembled as she placed it in his, but the moment their palms met, warmth surged up her arm, through her chest, straight into the ember that had lived inside her all these years. The bond roared. Kalen's lips curved, not a cruel smirk nor a king's cold smile, but something softer, something that made her knees weak. He led her onto the dance floor. The musicians faltered, bowstrings quivering as they exchanged frantic looks. Then, with a single gesture from Kalin, the music began anew, low, steady, a rhythm that seemed to echo with the beat of her own heart. Gasps rippled through the crowd as he drew her close. His hand rested firmly against her waist, anchoring her as though she were something precious. His other hand clasped hers, fingers entwining with a certainty that made her breath catch. "You're trembling," he murmured, his voice low enough for only her to hear. She dared to meet his gaze. "Everyone is staring." "Let them," he said simply. "I only see you." The words undid her. She had spent her life unseen, diminished, pushed into shadows. And now the most powerful man in the kingdom looked at her as if the entire world had been lit by her presence alone. The bond hummed between them, guiding her steps even as her body shook. Where she faltered, he steadied her. Where she hesitated, he led with patience, his movements fluid, graceful, utterly sure. It felt less like a dance, and more like a conversation their souls had been waiting years to have. Around them, outrage festered. Lords whispered furiously, their voices sharp as knives. "This is madness. She has no lineage, no wealth, a curse upon the throne, mark my words." But none dared step forward. Seraphine and Leora stood rigid near the edge of the hall, their faces pale masks of disbelief. Seraphine's lips curled in fury, her fists clenched so tight the jewels cut her skin. Alira's eyes shimmered with tears of rage. her lips trembling with words she dared not scream aloud. Leora saw them, and for once she did not look away in shame. She held Kalen's gaze instead. He spun her, silver skirts flaring, her laughter escaping before she could stop it. His answering smile was raw, unguarded, like a man who had found water after years of thirst. The court could whisper, her sisters could burn. None of it mattered, because here in his arms she was not ash. She was fire. As the final note of the song lingered, Kalin slowed, drawing her closer until she could feel the steady pound of his heart against her chest. His forehead lowered to hers, their breaths mingling. The hall held its breath. "You are my choice," he said, loud enough that every lord, every lady, every servant heard. His voice carried the finality of a king's decree. Queen or nothing. There will be no other. The bond flared so bright she swore the world itself shifted, and when his lips brushed her temple, tender, reverent, claiming, the court erupted into chaos. Chapter 12. The ballroom roared with outrage. Nobles surged like a restless tide, their jeweled sleeves flaring as they gestured wildly, their voices layering into a storm of protest. Some cried betrayal, others shouted scandal, and still more wailed of curses and doom. "She is nothing," one lord bellowed. "An orphan, filth dragged from the ashes. A trick," another howled. "He has been ensnared, bewitched by a sorceress." Leora shrank instinctively at the noise, her fingers tightening around Kalen's hand. Fear threatened to curl her back into the shadows where she had lived her life. But Kalen's grip was unyielding, anchoring her, pulling her into the center of the storm. He stood tall, his presence cutting through the uproar like a blade. The Alpha King did not shout, he did not plead, he simply raised his hand. Silence fell like an executioner's axe. Kalen's voice, when it came, rolled like thunder. "You dare question me?" The hall trembled. Lords shifted uneasily, ladies averted their eyes. The air itself seemed to bow beneath his fury. "You forget yourselves," he continued, his wolf flashing in his gaze. "I am not council-bound. I am not a puppet of lineage or coin. I am Alpha King, sovereign over blood and land, master of every pack from mountain to sea. My word is law, my choice, final." He drew Leora closer, his hand pressing protectively at her waist. His voice softened, but the edge of steel remained. "And I choose her." The bond between them flared so bright Leora thought all must feel it. It thrummed in the floor, in the air, in the very marrow of the court. "She is my mate, my equal, my queen." The nobles recoiled, their fury strangled by the power in his voice. Yet one dared step forward, Lord Varric, gaunt and silver-haired, his mouth twisted with disdain. "This is folly," he spat. "We will not bow to a kitchen drudge." Gasps rippled. Leora's heart clenched, shame burning hot. But Kalin only smiled, slow, dangerous, wolfish. "Then do not bow," he said. "Break instead." With a snap of his fingers, Vanar leapt from the shadows, the massive wolf's growl rattling the chandeliers. The noble stumbled back, face ashen, words strangled in his throat. None dared follow his lead. The hall went still again, held by the Alpha King's iron will. And then Seraphine's voice broke the silence. "She bewitched you!" she screamed, pointing at Leora with shaking hands. Her face was contorted, beauty twisted into something feral. "She is filth, nothing more. She is ugly, worthless. You cannot, you must not." Elira shrieked too, her voice shrill, desperate. "It should have been me. We are the daughters of House Davra, not her." The sisters lunged forward, their fury spilling like venom, but Kalen's growl shook the very air. Enough. The single word froze them in place. His wolf bled into his voice, primal and commanding. "Your envy is a stench in this hall. You speak of lineage? Then let it be known, your house will carry only shame for generations to come. You will kneel before your queen, or you will crawl out of my kingdom in disgrace." Seraphine paled, Elira sobbed, and in the end, both fell to their knees, forced down by a power greater than pride. Leora's breath caught. For the first time she saw them small, not giants towering above her with scorn, but broken, pitiful, powerless. Ashes to ashes. Kaelen turned back to her. The fire in his eyes softened, gentled, as he lifted her hand and raised it high for all to see. "Look well," he said, his voice carrying like prophecy. "This night marks the end of cruelty. the end of empty crowns and hollow bloodlines. This night, your queen is chosen, not for vanity, not for wealth, but for strength of spirit. For the fire no cruelty could extinguish. He dropped to one knee before her, the Alpha King kneeling at last. Gasps echoed, louder than before, but this time tinged with awe. "Leora," he said, her name reverent as prayer. "Will you stand with me? Will you rule as my queen?" Tears blurred her vision. The girl who had been nothing, who had been ash and shadow, stood trembling at the edge of a life she had never dreamed could be hers. Her voice was soft, but it carried. Yes. The bond blazed, sealing them, roaring through the hall like wildfire. Kalin rose, his lips brushing hers in a kiss both tender and claiming. The hall erupted, not with outrage now, but with thunderous cheers, the sound of an entire kingdom bowing to its new queen. And as the crown was placed upon her head, heavy and gleaming, Leora understood at last. She had not been too ugly, she had not been nothing. She was chosen, she was fire, she was queen. Epilogue. The palace was quiet at last. The roaring of the court, the clash of voices, the chaos of power, all of it had faded into the night. The torches burned low in their sconces, the marble halls stood empty, and beyond the tall windows, the moon kept its silent watch. Leora stood at the balcony of her new chambers, crown heavy upon her head, gown still shimmering from the ball, but it was not the crown she felt most keenly. It was the bond. The fire within her pulsed steady now, no longer wild and restless. It had found its match, its mirror. It had found him. Her reflection in the glass still startled her. She did not see the girl smeared with ash, shoulders hunched from scorn. She saw a woman alight with something fiercer than beauty. She saw a queen, and yet a whisper of doubt clung. Could she truly be this? Could she stand beside him in the daylight, when the weight of the crown would not be softened by music and vows? The soft sound of footsteps drew her from her thought. Kalin entered quietly, his cloak undone, his crown abandoned. No Alpha King now, just the man. His storm-gray eyes softened when they found her, as though she were the only star in his sky. "You should be resting," he said gently, though his lips curved with the faintest smile. "So should you," she whispered back. He came to her then, slow and deliberate, until the fire in her chest thrummed with every step. He reached up, hands steady, and lifted the crown from her head. "Too heavy," he murmured, setting it aside. His fingers brushed her hair, reverent, and lingered there. "You don't need this to be my queen." Her throat tightened. "I was afraid," she admitted softly, "that they would tear me apart, that I was not enough." Kalen's jaw flexed, and for a moment his wolf flashed in his eyes, protective, furious at even the memory of her doubt. His hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing her skin with aching gentleness. "They will never touch you," he vowed. "Not while I breathe. And as for being enough..." He leaned closer, his forehead resting against hers, his voice a low growl meant only for her. "You are everything. More than I ever deserved." Her breath hitched, the fire within her surged, not wild this time, but warm, steady, sure. The bond sang between them, filling the silence with certainty. She lifted her hands, resting them against his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart. "And you are mine," she whispered. His lips curved into that rare, unguarded smile that made him look less a king and more a man starved for love. "Yes," he murmured, and then he kissed her. It was not the claiming kiss of the ball, not fierce or defiant. This was slower, deeper, a vow written not in law but in love. His hands framed her face. Hers clutched his tunic, and for a long, endless moment, there was no court, no crown, no kingdom, only them. When he drew back, breath mingling with hers, his voice was raw with honesty. "We will build this kingdom together," he said. "Not with fear, not with cruelty, with fire, with love." Tears glimmered in her eyes, but her smile was steady. "With fire," she echoed, and as the moon bathed them in silver light, the Alpha King and his chosen queen stood together at the threshold of a new dawn, bound by fate, bound by love, and stronger than the world that had tried to keep them apart. The end. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. Kindly comment below if you loved it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for more amazing content. Drop a comment with your favorite moment, and I'll see you in the next one.